Connecting to audio is going on. All good, all good. Stefan, good to see you there from Vienna. How are you? Good to see you. You can hear me. Henry, Paul from Georgia, Werner, Norfolk or London?
Suffolk, to be precise.
That's true.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Lots of people coming in from America. Good to see you, Jack, Baker, Brian, Nick. Nick, very good to see you. Tishan coming in from Hanover. There we are. I think we're all in. Are we all in? Pretty in. Do put your screens on if you choose, and more people coming. So moving swiftly on as we do, the format here, as you know, is that we are in conversation for 20 minutes, and then we move to a 10-minute Q&A. It's my great pleasure to bring Jennifer Schipf here, who's been a great forum member based in New York, but actually sitting in Miami currently. And she has kindly invited Bernadine, sitting in London, to this conversation to discuss what is next in the art world. So Jennifer, with no further ado, I'm going to hand the baton to you, and we look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We wanted to have a bit of a conversation with Bernadine Bröcker. She's CEO of Vastari, a fantastic tech and art-related enterprise that works very closely with a large portion of the art world, in particular museums these days. But she's had an illustrious career in a number of different positions throughout the art world, most recently much more focused on tech, but certainly in some of the traditional aspects of the art world historically. And Bernadine and I have known each other for several years. We've collaborated on a few projects, and we've watched the art market and the art world change quite a bit. So I think it will be wonderful to hear a little bit more of what Bernadine's seeing in the art world in general. No specific area, there's quite a lot of change in general. So Bernadine, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I thought what could be fun, of course, it's a little bit of an overdone topic, what's gone on through COVID, but I think there's very little that hasn't shifted or changed fairly dramatically. So at the risk of being a little predictable, it would be fun to just hear your view on some of the major shifts or the most dramatic changes you've witnessed in the art world over this last year.
Well, I think that having run a technology company in the art world, I've seen how reticent the entire industry is towards technology. A lot of doors have been closed throughout the past 8 years that I've been running my company, but somehow people's eyes were opened, as they were in many other industries, about the potential for technology, particularly the potential for technology to open to new markets that you might not have realized before, whether that is new bidders at auction houses or new buyers on online galleries, or even people coming to listen in to talks that museums were organizing during lockdown from Korea or China for museums in, for example, the Transport Museum in London did a talk about the tube that was attended by people in Korea. And it just opened people's eyes about the potential of what could happen if you did this.
Fabulous. And because of that slightly more open-minded thinking, do you think that there's any particular sector of the art world that you've seen move more rapidly, whether it's galleries or museums or even the way people collect?
Absolutely. All of those things. So in terms of moving quickly, I think what was really interesting to watch in the first few days was how the auction houses reacted, because it's also a very highly competitive space if you look at Christie's and Sotheby's. And we held some talks for our collectors about the differing strategies between Sotheby's and Christie's and how they were tackling the online auction space. And I think a year later, what we've really seen is almost like a game showification of auctions. It's a huge production, but I guess the physical auctions always were quite a theatrical event with the bidding and the excitement. And it's just been very interesting to see how what started off almost like an eBay turned into more like a game show, because the digital experience was more successful. And I think in general, that's something you can see across the board. Even, for example, if you look at what museum websites looked like before the pandemic, it was primarily about getting directions to the museum or an archive of the objects inventorized on the website, not really an experience. Whereas now there are more and more things coming out where you have an immersive experience. Maybe it's a virtual reality show, or it's a talk with a curator that actually is fun to attend rather than boring.
Agreed. And that word experience is so interesting, because I remember in 2019, a number of retailers, and it didn't start then, but as recent as 19 pre-pandemic, a lot of retailers, a lot of organizations in the for-profit space were definitely refocusing on experiential opportunities, whether they were virtual or not. It was about experience, not merchandise or product. And it feels like it took a little while, but the art world got there pretty quickly because of the pandemic. And I would not have expected to see that in the art auction world, especially for the large contemporary evening sale style events. But that really did pivot dramatically and quickly, and presumably revenue is driving that. Did you see a similar shift, or do you feel as much change or as much tech uptake was similar in the gallery commercial dealer world as well?
Well, I think one of the biggest immersive experiences that galleries were organizing were art fairs. And so that was where a lot of galleries are in the same space for a short period of time. And I think they misunderstood when creating the online viewing rooms for art fairs what they should have tried to replicate. Because what the first initial online viewing rooms was trying to replicate the booths and the map of the art fair, when actually why people go there is to see each other and be seen and buy something where other people can see that you bought something and that it's no longer available. It's not about the fact that the gallery is in the top left-hand corner of the tent. And I think that was a misunderstanding, when that's what happens in digitization all the time. People sometimes really replicate what was offline online and don't take some of the soul that actually drives the offline experience.
Makes perfect sense. And so with all of this greater embracing of technology, what are some of the more immediate disruptions or changes in the market today? We're sort of past the year mark. We've got a lot more digital integration and enthusiasm than ever. What are some of the biggest changes now coming out of all of that experimentation?
Well, actually, this is the screen behind me is actually a presentation I gave in 2019. And the headline that you can see is Van Gogh print or original oil, the web has it. And this was the front page of the New York Times art section in 1999. So more than 20 years ago, the New York Times was presuming that all art would be sold online. And the truth is, it was only 19% of art that was being sold online back in 2019. And it's grown now. So last year, though the entire number of transactions shrunk, I think it was something like 36% of sales came from online channels. So suddenly you do have a larger amount of e-commerce on the art front. But of course, the in real life experience is still immensely important, and it's not going to go away. And people have a hunger for culture and for experiences. What I do think is interesting is we already saw a shift. So in my company, what we do is we connect collectors with museums who want to borrow their pieces for exhibitions, and also exhibition producers who create shows and tour them to different venues. So clearly in 2020, we were screwed because there was nothing going on and we didn't know what to do. So what we suddenly realized was that we were facilitating physical objects going to physical venues. Increasingly, we saw digital objects going to physical venues. So that's, for example, virtual reality experiences that were being experienced in person. There was one, for example, that we toured at the Saatchi Gallery that was an immersive experience with virtual reality. It could see your breath, you heard things, and you basically felt like you were inside of a tree. A really amazing artwork. And so you increasingly had digital objects going to physical venues, and the standards for that weren't as clear. So when you're talking about a painting, you say it has to be this far from the ground. You need to maybe put a label on the side. You need to do all these things. And for digital technologies, it hasn't really been defined. And then what's interesting now is we increasingly have digital locations where this art is being shown. So virtual museums, what some Web3 people call the metaverse. And so we need to create some standards about how, not only about how the art is displayed within these virtual environments, but also new business models for that type of interaction.
Great. And I feel like this next topic's a bit of Pandora's box, but it's everywhere in the press and on everybody's minds. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're viewing NFTs and where you think we're likely to be going, and how much of it is craze, how much of it is a new frontier, and your general thoughts on that space?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I already mentioned the metaverse, so that's kind of implying the whole Web3 and NFT phenomenon. But I think I already was inspired by blockchain technology since 2016, and I helped organize a conference at Christie's in 2018 about blockchain and its use cases within the industry. If anyone on the call is interested, it's on YouTube. It's called the Christie's Art and Tech Summit, and it's very long though. It's like 7 hours, so I don't recommend listening to the whole thing. But what we did at the time was we looked at 3 use cases for blockchain within the art market. One of them was about provenance. So having change of ownership documents recorded in the blockchain, having information about the artwork saved in the blockchain, condition reports, etc. The second use case was digital art. And in that sense, back then it wasn't even called NFTs, it was just called art on the blockchain. And it was it's interesting to think that back in 2018, the infrastructure was very similar, but something slightly changed. We can maybe touch on that. And the third example was about tokenization. So there are many companies that are exploring whether you could potentially issue shares in works of art or do things to make it more accessible to invest. I think that in the last case, there is a company called Masterworks that is growing a lot in that space, not on the blockchain. They actually have to file every painting that they sell shares in as a BVI kind of security that you can invest in. So it's quite high touch. So it's not really a scalable proposition, but there are some people who are doing that with NFTs now. So the boom, there's some good stuff with NFTs and some bad stuff with NFTs. I think the good stuff is digital artists who previously could never really sell their work now are getting those opportunities. So up to now, they could only really take commissions. So musical artists who commission digital artists to create works for their music videos, or gaming studios, commercial work. But really, when you're buying a contemporary artwork, you're both buying the thing that you want to own, but you also know that you are supporting the artist. And then also you're kind of betting that maybe in the future, you'll be able to sell it again. And that was never possible with digital art, but NFTs provide that access. So that was kind of the inspiring thing that happened. And then because it's on the blockchain, you can actually build in resale royalties. So every contract that's sold, you can actually have a percentage go back to the creator wallet. So that means that artists can have an ongoing income, even if there are no, even long after the first sale.
Which is incredibly groundbreaking and touches on a lot of rights and artists' issues that have come up over the last many years. And do you find that also, that the technology also allows artists to not just sell digital art, which didn't have an audience before, but also to connect with their collectors a little bit differently because of all the technology? Are they able to stay in contact with collectors or track who's collecting their work?
Yeah. Actually, that's one of the other really inspiring things. So because you can, on the blockchain, you can see everything. People are anonymous, but you can see the wallet that has bought your work. So if I create an NFT on one of these platforms and someone buys an NFT of my work, I can see their wallet and I can see the other items within their wallet. So you kind of have this bit of a transparent art market. And what some artists even do is that they'll create like a secret drop of works of art to all the wallets of people who bought a work by them before. And that kind of is a wonderful way that you can connect with your supporters in that couldn't have been done before. Yeah.
So, and that's an interesting idea because it goes very much beyond social media and sort of advertising or self-promotion. That's a totally different distribution.
Well, and
Great.
I think speaking of social media, I think that what also has happened with a lot of the artists is that you realize that if you're promoting yourself across Instagram and Facebook, technically those terms and conditions say that Facebook and Instagram own your digital artwork now because you're giving away the copyright of that image and you're giving a license to publish that work forever. So by creating NFTs, you're kind of regaining ownership of those assets and saying, no, actually, guys, I made this. This is mine. If it's being used in any specific way, I should get credited. And I think that's kind of what the Web3 is about. It's about taking away a bit of that centralization with Google and Facebook, et cetera, and regaining control of your assets.
Interesting. And then in just these last few minutes, I wondered about, no one's got a crystal ball and there's an awful lot going on, but given how much things are rapidly shifting and the fact that the art world is no longer en masse ignoring or resisting technology, do you see any particular trends, whether it's what collectors will be up to? Values are certainly not going down anytime soon. What museums might be doing differently with the virtual world and with some of the budget constraints and difficulties they've had, or dealers or anything else? Do you see any particular new trends emerging?
Well, on the collector front, I think that there is much more awareness of the carbon footprint of their collecting practices. So in terms of flying to every single art fair and needing to be everywhere. Also on the museum curator front, it's quite interesting. There was this kind of cachet within an art exhibition to say, I got this from the most far off location that you could possibly get this. And I've brought it together within our museum. And look how great I am. I think there's a different view of that now, of like, was it really worth flying that, or bringing that down from the Alps to be in your museum for 3 months? I think there will be a little bit more realism around that. And the technologies for digital showing of these works has improved so much that you could easily have an augmented reality version of the work there, or include it as a hologram rather than having the physical object itself.
Mm-hmm. And museums certainly need content, or are interested in content which will generate visitors. So I imagine there'll be a lot more of that anywhere in the world, so that not everyone's traveling, but museums then also gain the opportunity for greater content and connectivity with visitors who aren't local or coming to them.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting to hear museums brainstorming about how to attract more of a local audience, because one museum I was speaking to, they have 2 million visitors from around the world every year, and only 600,000 of them are from their home country. So if travel is down, how do they keep their numbers up? And that's about being relevant to their audiences. It's bringing things that really draw crowds, but also creating more meaningful experiences and connecting with what people really want to see. So I've always been a big believer in data-driven analysis. So looking at what people actually find interesting rather than what a curator thinks they would find interesting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, on that note, it seems that the answer really is there's more that's changing than that which is staying the same. There's just an awful lot in play at the moment.
But
Great.
People still want the same too, right? There's this desire for what was there before. Yeah.
It's going to be very interesting. Wonderful. Well, Simon, I think we're sort of at the 20-minute mark. Should we think about questions?
You've done a great job. Thank you so much. There's lots of questions coming in. And I want to ask my question, please, which is just sort of moving on to it in terms of in the immersive experience, Bernadine, and I know the guy Winkleman. Is it Winkleman who sold his
Yeah,
his for
he's
50
known
million?
as Beeple. Yeah, that's his
Beeple. That's right. Yeah. Because I read somewhere that the next thing he's going to be doing is digitally certifying installations, and I did think that was interesting, i.e. the same image being shown in museums or galleries or on the front of buildings at the same time across the world. And I thought that was an interesting immersive experience.
Well, I think oh gosh, there's so much there. In terms of the actual work that's sold, a lot of people don't know that it is actually 5,000 works. It's not just one. And it was that people created a drawing a day for 13 years. So people really felt something about that collage because it represented also how much graphics have improved over the last 13 years, especially if you're a gamer or someone who works in virtual reality. That's quite inspiring. If you look at his first drawings, they're like Microsoft Paint, like a scribble. And then you get to these very high resolution renders with 3D spaces, etc. So it's kind of about the trajectory of our human experience the last 13 years in a virtual sense. And so it is culturally significant. And if you divide it, then it's 16,000 per drawing rather than 69 million. So you could justify it somehow, maybe that way. But I completely think that part of this NFT story is about the digital original and the concept that you can reproduce things as much as possible, but there is a digital original. And I'm referencing that somehow, which is sometimes conceptually very difficult for people to understand because you're used to art in the age of reproduction and book publishing and licensing deals that are inspired by that. But I understand it because we're talking about borrowing a physical original all the time. So the concept of borrowing a digital original and placing it within experiences and having the permission to do so makes sense to me.
Good. Thank you so much. And Ian, I'm going to come to you, but then after that, if I may, I'd like to bring Nick Dawes and Jim Greenberg in together because I rather feel, given that you're both in the world of art, that you might be able to answer each other's questions. But Ian, from Lausanne, can you come
Hello.
in? Please?
Hi.
Thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating. It's a slightly techie question. Well, it's two parts. It's one is just in terms of the technology. Are you using Are they using off the shelf like Ethereum?
Oh yes.
Okay.
I can immediately. I just read your question as well. So the term NFT actually developed from an Ethereum standard, which is the ERC 721, which is a specific smart contract made for non-fungible tokens. Okay. And that was really what propelled this whole phenomenon, because people were able to create a kind of standard protocol of how these non-fungible tokens should be displayed within a wallet. So suddenly it changed everything. But now, because Ethereum has such a huge carbon footprint, there are many people using other chains. The most popular I've seen is Tezos. They created an FA2 contract that is being used for NFTs as well.
Sorry.
So we've cut Ian off there. Sorry, Ian, but you're an old friend. I'm sure you don't mind. Anyway, moving on. Nick, I'm going to bring Nick and Jim Greenberg in here. And Jim, perhaps you'd ask your question and Nick could help answer it along with Bernadine as well. Jim, good to see you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Jim.
Hello there. How are you?
Good.
My question really was about the auction world and my sense that my own collector's inability and my inability to go in at a preview, take a look at a work with my own eyes, bring a conservator if I choose, has really been impaired by the pandemic and by the new practices. And I'm wondering whether you think that a new subspace, professional subspace, may develop from the need for auction houses to better assess and convey condition to collectors.
Could I answer that briefly?
Can I bring Nick in on that one first?
Sure.
just explain about Heritage Auction, and then we'll move.
I'm happy to address that. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Bernadine. I really enjoyed what you're saying and learning a good deal from it. I'm a former Sotheby's auctioneer. I currently am an auctioneer at Heritage Auction. There's no question that condition reporting has become a more acute issue within the auction world, large and small. If anything, it affects the smaller auctioneers, and Heritage is the third largest in the world. So I'm talking about all the other smaller, right down to the tiny auctioneers. It affects them quite seriously because it seems an increasing number of bidders today want to know everything about an object. You have to photograph it 10 times from every angle and discuss it and write reports and details on it. And I think Jim's point is an interesting one. Could it create a separate industry almost? I'm certainly all in favor of telling bidders, if you want to know a great deal more, you really should either come or send someone or be prepared to pay a little extra for that service. So I see a demand for it and a potential for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the first thought was that auction houses who are very adept at making changes to meet the market and the needs of the collector might start to employ beefed up teams in-house, whether it's on their own dime or at additional charge to the collector, to be prepared to meet these issues. So I thought you would know, Nick, because you are in the business.
Well, a lot of the issues are being addressed with advancements in the technology of photography or recording, kind of micro imagery that is a very new thing, but it's penetrating the auction world. And I think that's going to solve a lot of problems. And big auction companies, Heritage included, have a system where you can look at something online with much better ability than you can with the naked eye. You can magnify things, turn them around, look at every single surface of it, and really get to know it very well. So I think that technology is solving a lot of the issues. But what you can't take away is the fact that a bidder will use the condition report against the auctioneer. They'll buy something and then they'll return it, 6 weeks later saying, well, you said there were 3 chips on the canvas and there's actually 4.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting.
Really happening, and it's a big problem. I think mostly for the small auctioneers.
Yeah, I mean, in the art world in New York anyway, the onus has been on the collector for a long time. The buyer beware is known by any serious collector. And so that really, creates some touchy issues. You can use the photography, and I hope that auction houses will start to use that technology, Christie's and Sotheby's in particular. I have not found it particularly useful so far in looking at objects, but I'm looking for crackle and other things. And obviously you can't use, any kind of special light through a computer, although maybe that will develop over time. And that's sort of why I raise these issues.
So Bernadine, will you come in, please, and take your view on what Nick...
I was just going to let it go. I just shared some links in the chat. Firstly, Articheck has been around since 2013, and they are an app that conservators within museums use, but also a lot of other collectors and shippers use. And during the lockdown, they were used a lot by as a virtual courier service. So you could do condition reports during the trajectory of an artwork moving if you didn't have a physical courier person going with the art. It's really advanced technology and great. So I won't say I've heard it firsthand, but word on the street has it that auction houses are sometimes reluctant about making their condition reports too great. But I personally bought something at auction during the lockdown, and I felt that the condition report description on the Sotheby's website I was looking at was much more detailed than what I would have seen before the pandemic. I think they have been making an effort to put more information in there. And then the Arius technology that I shared is a newer example. They're also working with Crozier, one of the big shippers, and they've created this kind of special high resolution, what you were saying, Nick, scanning technology that you can see even the crackler and everything of a work of art in the viewing room.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I was not aware of either of those technologies.
So thank you all for that. And Jennifer, thank you so much for inviting Bernadine to join us. And thank you for your input with the questions. I did want to ask you actually just quickly, maybe you can give me a quick answer, just from your perspective as an insurer of art. How does that, how do you now think about insuring digital art? And there must be so many questions and difficulties behind that.
Exactly right. And we're fortunate in that we've had historically two different teams, one of whom was already looking at cryptocurrencies and ensuring either cold storage or blockchain-based cryptocurrencies, which many of our competitors aren't doing. So we have at least a bit of a head start, but we're actively looking at where we think the product needs will be and what the clients will be up to. So I'd say sort of watch this space. It's rapidly evolving and we're in the thick of it now, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity and loads of demand. There's been so much inquiry lately because of all the press around the Beeple sale. So it's getting pretty dynamic now.
Okay, very good. Well, for all of us in London, the good news is that Jennifer's coming to live in London from June or July. New York's loss and London's gain. So we look forward to welcoming you, Jennifer, when you come here. And for the moment, thank you so much for everything today. And thank you again, Bernadine. And hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for inviting me.
Thanks, Bernadine.
Nice.